Okay, so now you can imagine what's happened is he was on Pleasure Island and everything went to hell, fundamentally. And so he jumped into the water to escape from that, and that's equivalent to plunging into chaos. And so chaos was an escape from pathological tyranny. And now he's tried to go home. So this is the psyche, in its search for maturation, runs into an obstacle, which is the tyrannical element of the Great Father that it cannot cope with, and it trots home, runs home. It's a defeat. Typical part of a hero story is the initial defeat of the hero when he encounters usually either the terrible Great Father or the terrible Great Mother. So this is a retrogressive, Jung would call this retrogressive restoration of the persona. So it's sort of like maybe you're a well-adapted adolescent and you live at home and you're a happy adolescent and everything's good at home, and then you go out to try to be an adult and you fail, and then when you come back home you try to act like a happy adolescent again, but you're not. What you are, in fact, is an unhappy adult. And if you move back to the happy adolescent mode of being, then it's false and pathological. You can't go home again, another typical motif in literature. Now the cricket, I can't tell you everything about this story. I can tell you a couple of strange things about it. One is that the cricket is Jiminy Cricket, right? And the initials of Jiminy Cricket are JC. And Jiminy Cricket was a common Southern American mild form of cursing. It's the equivalent of Jesus Christ. And so you might think, and of course, the cricket is Pinocchio's conscience. And, well, so then you might ask yourself, why in the world would a pejorative, mildly pejorative term for Jesus Christ be applied to a cricket who's guiding a puppet into the water to rescue his father from a whale? Why would any of that happen? And the answer to that is, you know why, but you can't say why. You can't say why you know, or what it is that you know. But the mere fact that it makes sense, and it does, is an indication from a Jungian perspective that you're operating at an archetypal level. You understand this. And so I could say, here's an example of why the cricket is a bug. Well, things bug you, right? We say that, things bug me. Well, you should do something about the things that bug you, because that's your conscience calling to you. It's destiny in some sense manifesting itself as an unconscious impulse. That really bugs me. Means, if you can, you should do something about it, because you think about it, man, there's a lot of things out there that might bug you, but lots of them don't. But some of them do. Well, why do those bug you and not the other things? Well, that's a complicated question, but one potential answer to it is that there's part of your psyche that's oriented towards further development. Jung would call that the self. And that's like the totality of everything that you could be. And it's a strange sort of entity in some sense, because it's partly potential, and it's potential that expands across time. But the way that your potential totality calls to you in the present is by placing things in front of you that are your problem. And they announce themselves as your problem, and they do that by bothering you. So then if you pick up the task of fixing the things that bothers you, then you find the pathway to further expansion of your personality. So, and that's what's happening with Pinocchio. Now, one of the things that's really interesting about the Pinocchio movie, and that makes it incredibly sophisticated, is that despite the fact that the cricket is an avatar of Christ, so to speak, the cricket has things to learn just like Pinocchio. And so that's very cool, because it's so cool, it's so sophisticated, because it means that you do have a conscience that guides you, but until you establish a dialogue with it, both you and the conscience are immature. You have to establish a conscious dialogue with it, and then interact together in a manner that propels your development across time. And that'll stop you from being a marionette of forces that would make you a braying donkey who does nothing but slave away in salt mines. So, okay, so Pinocchio goes home. That doesn't work, and that's where we're going to start here.
I mean, obviously this is starting to bother you as this, you buy into it to begin with, and you're enthusiastic about it to begin with, and you attribute that to, well, the mechanics of the initial education, let's say. It's a group phenomenon. It capitalizes on empathy. And it sounds benevolent, certainly. In fact, it's the very essence of benevolence in some sense. So it's going to be seductive, regardless of whether or not it's correct, but you become uncomfortable with it. Well, the first thing you're uncomfortable with is that you were implicitly asked to produce a falsehood in relationship to your own identity, which was when you were asked the question about what you liked about being white. And you said that what you said wasn't right exactly, or wasn't correct, wasn't true. It was something that you whipped up on the spot because of the nature of the demand of the situation. And you remember that, so obviously that's significant.
I think I was just meeting what I thought was an absurdity with an absurdity. You know, like I felt the question was a little bit absurd. It's sort of like the premise, right? The premise is, what do you call it? Like how long have you been beating your wife kind of question. You know, so the premise of whiteness is you have to accept the premise in order to answer the question. I really have never been comfortable with the premise, period, because I don't think that it, you know,
and it takes a lot of presence. It takes a lot of presence of mind when you're asked a question, to question the question, especially when you're the student and it's the teacher that's, so to speak, it's the authority figure that's posing the question, because you immediately have to rebel and you have to do it in an extremely sophisticated way.
Yeah, and you know, this could get back to the school, and I might not have passed the class, and you know, I'm white, so that would have been problematic. And why are you? And that might have had job repercussions, or you know, promotions or whatever. You know, you realize that to question the question.
This is also mandatory.
Yeah, and to question the question in these circumstances is, you know, the risk of that is so much greater than the triumph of dismantling the question, that you're never going to. And you may even fail at dismantling the way, like your little rebellion may lead nowhere, and you may be wrong, you know, which is the hesitation that anyone would have with an objection, just that you might be wrong. And so, of course, you're just going to fall on that side of the equation. I mean, that's what I did. Some people don't, but that would, you know, I did that.
Most people do.
Yeah.
And no wonder.
Right.
It's hard not, like you outlined a bunch of reasons why it's difficult to, you know, come up with exactly the right response at that second. It's not like it's a question you're prepared for.
Right. And, you know, I think the students do it all the time, you know, because there's tremendous social cost to challenging any of the assumptions of our anti-racist programming or the manner in which it's delivered.
What are the costs for the students?
Social opprobrium. You could have, you know, teachers write recommendations for them if they get a reputation, that there's a fear that it could affect their applications. Students have come to me with, you know, concerns and examples of papers that they wrote, say, you know, on taking a position that went against the orthodoxy, and they've, you know, suffered a grade hit from it. And I've asked them, like, are you sure it just wasn't a good paper? You know, are you sure? And then like, no, I actually cited this, and this, and I stood, you know, and so I think they're real. I think that they're real. And there's actually been, you know, stories that they brought to me that are, you know, someone defends capitalism or something, and then they have a big talking to after class or something like that, which is just.
Well, yes. I mean, how could you possibly defend capitalism while you're going to a $55,000 a year private school? Right. I mean, what's the probability that your parents are capitalists? 100%.
Very high.
So basically, you're being set to task because you have the gall to defend the very attribute of your parents that enabled you to go to the school in the first place, and that, of course, enabled the school.
Right, and it's such an ironic thing that both the administration and most faculty have such contempt for the very thing that makes them have a job. You should be talking about ideas based on what make ideas sound or unsound, not the person who's saying them. So I was seeing situations where, you know, white students would make a claim, and then that claim was discounted by someone else because of their privilege.
Right,
And
but
that,
you're making, of course, the white supremacist assumption that there are such things as ideas and that they can be rank ordered in terms of quality,
right.
and that the purpose of discursive speech is precisely to do such things, and et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. And so the whole solipsistic nature of it, I was like, you can't even have a conversation. This is not a way to have a functioning. You're not preparing people to function in a truly variegated world of ideas. It's not going to work.
It's worse in some sense. Is that the fundamental claim is that there's no such thing as a conversation. There's just different discourses of power. There's no conversation. Yeah. Conversation assumes ideas and the free flow of ideas and a rational individual actor and the capacity for logos and the individual as the central unit and so on and so forth. Mm-hmm. People who hold the critical race position, let's say, don't, it's not that they avoid confrontational conversations. They don't believe that there's such a thing as a conversation. It's not part of the system. So it's a fundamental dispute.
Yeah, no, that's true. I mean, and then the little things, like I remember talking to a colleague about a new hire, and she said, I said, well, what's he like, this new guy? And she said, well, he's like you. He's like me. Well, what do you mean by that? And she was like, oh, he's white. I was like, okay. All right. This is not a person that's a total stranger to me either. And I kind of walked away and like, really? So, okay. And, I also hear the objection to my objection, which is, see how it feels, white man? See how it feels to be treated as your race? That is, it's a, she might've been trying to teach me a lesson in some sense, like now you know how it feels, but that's not, okay, that's a point that you're making, but that's not a healthy thing. And that's not good, because it doesn't actually
reduce the sum total of misery in the world.
Yeah. I mean, yeah.
All right. So you're starting to feel disquiet, and you actually make this known.
Yes. And I make it known in 2019. I make it known in 2020. I talked to the assistant head. I talked to the head of school.
You're married?
I'm recently married. I've been married over a year, just over a year.
Okay. Do you have any children?
No children.
No children, but you are married.
But I'm married.
Okay, so I'm just wondering what you have resting on your jaw.
Exactly. Yeah. And I didn't. I have to say that not having kids is a huge part of why I feel like this is happening, that I've been able to stick my neck out, and I'm not. I don't judge anyone for balancing their duty to the truth and their duty to their family in whatever way that works for them, because both of them are important. Or to put things at risk, that's a personal choice, and I can't speak to any of that, but I think it definitely, not having mouths to feed and having some savings from my previous job and things, being smart with my money and not spending it unwisely as I had done a decade and a half ago. But I think that helped me to do what I'm doing.
All right. So how are you being treated by the administrative officials to whom you're registering your objection? Are you doing that in writing, or are you doing that
in person? Mostly in person. And I'm not writing anything official. I'm in the grumbling in my beard phase, I guess. I'm in the griping phase, where I would go and I would say, this is wrong. Like, why can't we teach, a broad range of viewpoints? Why do we always have to teach this ritualistic thing that's just a litany of, basically far left ideas? And, some of the administration were very sympathetic, like even overly so. Like I remember talking to the assistant head. He pulled down a copy of Jonathan Haidt off the bookshelf and was like, I'd love to teach this in my class. I really want to make this happen. I want to teach, so, more than I was sort of, or maybe just modeling it or humoring me or something.
But he had the book.
He had the book, that's right.
And he knew the book, and he knew where it was on his shelf.
I know. So like, but then in public, or in public, in front of the community, not saying nothing about it, right? So I think there's a tremendous amount of preference falsification still going on there,
Well, and, you outlined why. I mean, you lost your job.
Yeah.
So, these are high stakes games, and you make a mistake, and a mistake, you veer outside the realm of acceptable behavior, let's say, and what happens? Well, you get disproportionately punished for it. And there's a moral element to it too, which is, well, there's no bloody way someone like you should be teaching. So not only did we fire you, but we're right to do so.
Yeah.
So, and that's a very hard thing to withstand, which is something I also want to talk to you about. I mean, confident though you may be, or anyone may be, when your institution sheds you and surrounds that with accusations about the nature of your character, if you're not a complete psychopath, it tends to strike you to your heart. Because there's always the possibility that you're wrong.
Right. But I really knew I wasn't, because, coming out, there was this meeting, and I referred to it in the article or my essay, the self-care through an anti-bias lens meeting, which is what kicked off the whole past 2 months for me. It was a meeting where students were ostensibly going to learn how to take care of themselves during the pandemic, how to manage their emotions, how to take deep breaths and cope with things. And in that meeting, after some mind relaxing exercises like meditation and stuff, they put up the white supremacy, aspects of white supremacy culture slide.
And that's different than the pyramid, or
this is different than the pyramid. And this is, this is a common
elements
thing.
Of white supremacy.
Right. It's actually, there's different forms of it, but essentially, it's fairly common in this thing, as you know, and